Hello, bonjour, hello, hi, heya, and privyet, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Europuck podcast, the show where two Brits talk all things European hockey as part of the Hockey Podcast Network. My name is Hayden, or Odd Man Rush, as you can see right up above me, and joining me, of course, once again, no special guest this week, just the same old Chris Gadsby. Hey, Chris.
Hello, I am the special guest.
You're always the special guest, Chris.
I'm always here.
How you doing today, bud?
Without me, you would have no stats at all.
Absolutely. I'd be fumbling around, looking at all the different websites, and the recording would be really, really slow and stuttery. That's why I've got you around with your dual monitor amazingness to give us all the latest stats and all the latest news and basically correct me when I get something very clearly wrong. But anyway, how are you, Chris?
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's only, about 2 weeks to Christmas now.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close now,
it is 2 weeks to Christmas.
Yeah. Because
no, I've got that completely wrung, but anyway.
Well, it's because when we're recording it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When the day it comes out, it's 2 weeks to Christmas, yeah.
Yeah.
I just put in my holiday request for the Christmas week to work, although it seems to be the work system has gone really badly wrong, and apparently I haven't had a single day's holiday this year, according to the work system, even though I know I've taken time off.
Okay, so it's kind of a case of either on the one hand you're like, okay, well I can get away with this, or it's at the same time I don't want to be fired, so I probably should put in the exact days that I've got. You know?
So what I've had to do is put another request in from this Friday until New Year's Eve, and told my boss I don't actually want the time off, but I've got to make it look like I'm having the time off to bring myself back in. It's all messed up and weird. And, but I don't know what else I've really done since we last recorded.
Nothing
interesting?
Not
really, because I'd already got the new kit in by last week. So
okay, fair enough. The only interesting thing I can think of is a couple of my orders from Black Friday arrived, and I'm currently wearing the Liam Kirk signature series shirt from Crosscheck Clothing.
Kirky.
Shout out to them. Shout out to Crosscheck Clothing. Love their stuff. And got myself a Liam Kirk shirt. We're hoping to have him on the show at some point in the future, so I'll probably wear it when he's on as well and just be like an absolute fanboy. But anyway, enough about me being awkward. Let's move on to looking at some of the news, because we've got quite a lot to go through, folks. So let's start with the KHL, the Continental Hockey League. Basically, we're just going to run you through all the stats, all the scores, and all the standings, basically, and then we'll take you through some of the news. We're going to go a little bit quicker through the standings and everything compared to last week, because we know we ended up taking quite a long time to do it. So let me take you through the Western Conference of the KHL. We have CSKA Moscow still in first, not looking like they're going to move anytime soon, 55 points in 35 games. We have SK St. Petersburg in second, 47 points in 35 games. Of course, according to these stats, they have played one more game and have one less point than Lokomotiv, but Moscow and St. Petersburg are in two different divisions. Lokomotiv is in the same division as Moscow, so that's why they sit in third as opposed to second. Then you've got Dynamo Moscow, Dinamo Minsk, Sharopovets, and Jokerit in fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. Then the final playoff spot so far is Spartak Moscow. Then you have Vityaz Podolsk, HC Sochi, and Dinamo Riga in the outside the playoff race. Only just for Vityaz Podolsk, but the other two teams not really looking very good. And to be perfectly honest, it didn't really change that much from last week. I would imagine those three teams are going to be staying there for most of, if not the entirety of the season. Got a couple of games going on at the moment. We've got Moscow playing against Dinamo Minsk, so 4th, 5th battle there. Got Sharopovets leading Dinamo Riga, so they're hoping to improve their recent run. And HC Sochi playing against Kunlun Red Star at the moment. So a couple of scores coming in as we record this. Then in the Eastern Conference, we have Akbars Kazan still in first place, only 1 point back, but they've played one more game than CSKA Moscow for the regular season lead. We have Avangard Omsk in second with 49 points, so very similar for both East and West. The front-running team in that conference still very much up there and have got a bit of space compared to some of the other teams. Then you've got Metallurg Magnitogorsk in third place. They are currently playing Akbars Kazan, and Kazan are winning 1-0. Traktor Chelyabinsk in fourth, Salavat Yuleyev in fifth place. Avtoy Mobilis dropped a few places. They're on a 5-game losing streak, so they're on sixth place. Torpedo have jumped up to 7th place. They've got 3 wins in their last 5. Sabir Novosibirsk in 8th place. Then we've got Baris, Amur, Neftahimik, and Cologne outside the playoff race. However, Baris is still very much in the chase. They've got 3 to 5 games in hand compared to the other teams above them. But Neftahimik and Cologne Red Star and Amur, it is kind of looking very unlikely, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it is looking unlikely for those ones at the bottom. Yeah, not a great deal for me to add on to this, really. What it notes, obviously, as you said, CSK Moscow right out up at the top, and it's quite close in the West for the rest of the teams, as we discussed last week. Sochi and Dinamo Riga obviously off the back of it, but Podolsk and Spartak Moscow. There's only 3 points between Podolsk and Sharapovets in 6th, so a lot still to go with in the West. Looking over in the East, good run of form for Metalurg Magnitogorsk, 5-game winning streak to really push themselves up towards the top. But it is starting to look like it could be a 2-horse race there as well. Yes, Akbars Kazan currently 5 points clear, but Avangard Omsk with 3 games in hand on them, so they could close that gap and get those top 2 pulling away from the rest. You mentioned Avtomobilist Yekaterinburg. Their streak is actually far worse than what Flash Scores and what you can see on the screen if you're watching the YouTube version makes it out. Their losing streak is actually 9 games now.
Oh, wow.
They are, in the last 9 games, they've got 3 in overtime and 6 regulation losses. So considering that they were at 13, 4, 3, and 4, they've really gone downhill in the last few bits or so, a few matches or so. Again, Kunlun and Nizhny off the bottom as we've said, and yeah, it's starting to look quite close there. But I think in the East, it's those 2 teams getting out in front, and in the West, obviously it's the one team out in front, and the rest kind of falling in behind, but close at the bottom in the West. Not close at the bottom in the East with the 2 teams going off the bat there.
Yeah, pretty much. It's interesting to mention also Avtomobilist is, of course, coached this season by former disgraced NHL bench boss Bill Peters. So maybe the hockey gods have come a knocking and karma's got back to him. Interesting to note, though, Lokomotiv, Dynamo Moscow and Dynamo Minsk, all 3rd, 4th and 5th, they've won 4 of their last 5 games, according to Flash Scores, and each one they lost was their 3rd game in that batch, which is really interesting. They've got almost identical records in that same time frame, and I mean, there's only a couple of points separating these teams, so the KHL continues to be an interesting league,
Obviously completely irrelevant by the time this comes out, but 2 very quick goals at the start of the second period has pulled Kunlun level 2-2 with Sochi. They scored 2 goals in the first 4 minutes of the second period. So,
wow,
Sochi kind of really need that to try and close a 10-point gap for them now. Whereas Kunlun, it's only an 8-point gap up to Amur. But I mean, what we're talking up to the playoffs, Sochi are 12 off the playoffs and Kunlun are 14 off the playoffs. So unlikely for both sides, but you never know what can happen if you get 1 win on the board. I mean, Kunlun looking for 2 wins in a row, as are Sochi.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if these outside teams could get a couple of playoff or a couple of wins to get them a little bit closer, keep the parity of the league going, but it's looking highly unlikely, and that's kind of the trend that's going to carry on for the next couple of weeks and to the end of the season, pretty much. So that's the KHL. We talked you through that. Let's move across to Sweden as we take a look at the Swedish Hockey League. If my computer will play ball, it is playing ball. Here we are. So, first place in the league, we have Rögle BK, 19 games played, 41 points. We have Frölunda in second place with the same amount of points, but they've played 3 more games. The Växjö Lakers in third place with 1 less point, same amount of games played as Frölunda. So, it pretty much all depends on how Rögle plays in their games in hand as to where these top 3 teams are going to sort themselves out for the next few weeks or so. Then you've got Skellefteå, Åbro, Luleå. They're all in the kind of guaranteed quarterfinal playoff spots at the moment. All of them have played relatively the same amount of games, except Skellefteå have played 24 games. Everybody else has kind of played 19, 20, maybe 21 games. Leksands, Färjestad, Djurgården, and Oskarshamn are all in the kind of eighth finals. They take 7th to 10th in the league, and there's only a 6-point gap between 7th and 10th. There's a 5-point gap between 6th and 7th. So we're starting to see the teams that have got the better overall rosters or are having the better streaks at the moment kind of break away into that top 6 group. And then outside of the playoffs and even into the playout rounds, we have HV 71, which are tied with Oskarshamn for 10th place in points, but they've played 2 more games. You've got Linköping with 24 points, so 1 point back, and they've got the same amount of games played as Oskarshamn, so they might have the chance to jump back in there as well. Same amount of games played as Djurgården as well, but they've got 4 or 5 more points than these teams. And then Brynäs and Malmo down there in the play-out round. It's looking quite likely that these two teams might be sticking around there for the foreseeable future. Although Brynäs have only played 18 games, they've played the least amount of games as any other team in the Swedish Hockey League so far this season. So they have the chance to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. But they're already, 8 points back from the team just above them, let alone a playoff spot. So it's going to be a tough road, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and we know that from when we mentioned last week that Brynäs and Malmo, those two sides, were the two sides that ended up there last season, and only didn't go forward with the relegation because the season was postponed. So they kind of got another bite at the cherry, and unfortunately aren't taking it too much at the moment. The one that jumps out at me there is Oskarshamn, who are on a 7-game losing streak now. They had won quite a few games on the bounce before then, so they've kind of tumbled off somewhat. But as you said up at the top, Frölunda kind of where you'd expect them to be, but with the games in hand that Rögle have got, they could extend that up to potentially 9 points, which even at this stage of the season would be quite a lead for other teams to try and surmount. And again, as you said, that gap is starting to emerge now between Leia in 6th and Leksands in 7th. So you're looking as though it could easily be kind of the 6 teams, 7th to 12th, battling out for those round of 8 playoffs. But even then, you've got, as I said, Oskarshamn, HV71 and Linköping's kind of below the rest of them. So perhaps it's almost like little leagues at the moment. Obviously, there's still plenty to play, and the teams in those leagues could change, but you've almost got to be looking at the moment that Leksands, Färjestad and Djurgården are almost in a league of their own in the middle.
Yeah.
Oskarshamn, HV71, Linköping's again in that league for 10th. So it'll be interesting, obviously, over the next few weeks, see how it pans out over Christmas and into January. But there's kind of gaps starting to form now in that league.
Indeed. And with about half the season left to go, maybe 2/3 of the season left to go, a lot of those gaps might shorten. A lot of those gaps are only going to get wider and wider, and I would imagine there would be the teams towards the bottom of the standings are going to kind of be on the outside looking in far much more than they are right now. So that's the Swedish Hockey League for you. Now, usually, obviously, we move on to the Finnish Liiga, which we have the stats up here at the moment. Luko's in first place, tied with Eels. Pretty much the same as where we left them last week. Now, the reason for that is because there was some news announced regarding the Finnish Liiga, and that is the news that all of their games between December 3rd and December 19th have been postponed. So, essentially, the COVID-19 situation in Finland has worsened in recent weeks and months, if you want to say, and it looks like they've decided, look, things aren't going well at the moment, let's just take a kind of pre-Christmas break, see if we can sort everything out, dampen the effect that it's having on the league and everything like that, and see if we can get this going on. So I'll just read this quick article that I've got from Eurohockey.com. The coronavirus situation in Finland has deteriorated in recent weeks. The regional authorities have issued stricter restrictions this week being the 2nd of December, so a week before we recording this on the 9th of December, I might add. We never mentioned that at the beginning. It's the 9th of December today. Hi, guys. So the regional authorities have issued stricter restrictions. Due to the public restrictions granted, the board of directors of the Finnish Liiga decided today to put the league on hold from the 3rd to the 19th of December. During the autumn, we have worked hard to ensure the safety of the public, players and employees at match events, and have done well in that work. Now, however, the virus situation has changed for the worse in many areas, so the restrictions are understandable. However, it's not financially possible for us to play without an audience, said the chairman of the board of the league. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name. I'm not very good at Finnish, and I don't want to insult him. So all matches marked for the above time period, so the 3rd to the 19th, will be postponed to a later date. The league and teams will announce the new match dates for the postponed matches later. If the current restrictions are lifted earlier or extended, the league will immediately inform you of any consequences. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on the Finnish Liiga being postponed for essentially a 2-week period? That means that before Christmas we'll have one more episode, but they still won't be playing by the time we get back. So the next time we're going to actually talk about the Finnish Liiga will probably be in the new year. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Kind of, the league standings as they are at the moment are pretty much as they were when we discussed them last week in a lot more detail, and we'll revisit the Finnish League after Christmas. To me, it makes sense because rather than just having like half the teams postponing all their games and then ending up with a massive game disparity that we've seen in other leagues. Rather, what they've done is obviously cancel the whole league. So it kind of makes the fixture scheduling much easier on the other side of it, and keeps the teams much more even. So I quite like the move, but obviously we'll revisit the Finnish League after Christmas now.
Pretty much, yeah. There's not really anything else to talk about, really. I've got the stats now back up on the screen in terms of the standings at the moment, but other than that, like Chris said, we went into a lot of detail about them last week. There's no point going over it again when we've got so much else to talk about. So, Finnish Liiga, thank you very much, but we're going to move on to the Swiss National League next, which has still been playing. They've obviously had a lot to catch up on in recent weeks due to the situation with the virus themselves in Switzerland. But we have Lausanne HC out in first place. They have one less game played than Zurich, and they have 2 more points. Zurich going on a pretty good run recently, at least 5 straight wins. They're 29 points in 15 games. Geneva Servette HC, then Zug, Fribourg, they're in 3rd, 4th and 5th. I mean, they're only 4 points back. It's 4-point difference between 2nd place and 5th place. Only 6-point difference between 1st place and 5th place. Then it starts to drop off a little bit with Lugano in the final quarter-final playoff spot at the moment. 20 points in just 12 games, though. So Zug and Lugano have 12 games played. They've got plenty of opportunity to catch up, although Lugano hasn't necessarily played too well recently. They're 2 straight losses. Then you've got Ambry Piotta, Rapperswil, Biel, and Bern in the round of 8 finals. Kind of the other playoff spots, 7th to 10th. There's a 5-point difference between 10th and 7th, so there's a bit of a gap starting to open, but nothing a 3-4 game winning streak couldn't solve. And then down in last place, we've got HC Davos and the Langau Tigers. The Tigers, they're both teams. The good thing is, because we're still so early on in the season for the Swiss National League, Davos and the Tigers do have a chance to jump back into the race. They've both played 12 games. Davos is 2 points back from Bern. The Tigers are 4 points back from Bern. So they've both got games in hand on Bern as well, and Rapperswil, who are only a couple of points above them. So there's still all to play for in the Swiss National League. There's still lots of a lot of bouncing between positions in the standings for these teams. So there's not really a huge amount we can say, oh, these teams are done for the season, because it's still quite a competitive league at this point in time, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, the Swiss League as well, they're much like the Elite League does here and what have you. They're kind of intertwining the Swiss Cup as well. So they're not always playing league games, which is why from week to week this league looks as though it is going a little bit slower in comparison to some. And there are some teams, Zurich, for example, haven't played yet in December. They've got games postponed coming up. Lugano have got 2 games coming up that are postponed as well. So they're still getting hit a little bit with game postponements. But as you said, it's still kind of relatively early in that, because they had so many problems. Then they are struggling to make the fixtures. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully next year, when we're not constantly talking about postponements and leagues having problems, I must be saying. But I mean, as you look at the league standings, no one's really on a particularly hot or cold streak. I mean, Zurich are the hot team at the moment. They've won in all competitions their last 7 in a row. But as I said, 2 of those were in the Swiss Cup. So, and against lower ranked sides than them, one of them in particular. So, they're the hot team, and now they've not played for a while. So are they going to struggle coming back, with a few weeks without games? You never know. But yeah, it's all kind of relatively close. There's no massive gaps that are opening in the Swiss League already.
Yeah, and there's still plenty of hockey left to play, whether it be the Swiss Cup or the regular season. And another flip side you could look at for Zurich, for example, who haven't played in December yet, and we're already almost 10 days into December. They might be well rested enough and might have the chance to go out and, get the job done, because they might be able to get a few extra strides in compared to their opponents who have been playing more consistently. It either works one way or the other, right? So that's the Swiss National League. Good look at that league. We've got plenty of that season left to play, so it'll get more interesting as the weeks go on. Then next up, we have the Czech Extraliga, which is coming up now. So we're starting to see a bit of a gap with some of these teams here. Certainly towards the playoff race, there's one team that's kind of put themselves out of it already, although, anything can happen. So we've got Trinek in first place with 46 points in 17 games, Pulsen in second place with 43 points in 19 games, Karlovy Vary in third place with 39 points in 18 games, and then Sparta Prague 37 points in 20 games. So they're kind of the quarterfinal spots. There's already a 9-point gap between first and fourth, so there's a big gap opening there. I mean, it's still very much a two-horse race, although Karlovy Vary, they're a couple of games in hand, but Trinek have only played 17 games, so they've done quite well for themselves. They haven't actually lost a game in regulation, as far as I'm aware, this season, to shootout or overtime losses for them, so kind of makes sense as to why they're sitting so high up the standings. Then in the kind of round of 8, you've got Mlada Boleslav, Mantfield HK, Liberec, Kometa Brno, Vitkovice, Zlin, and Litvinov and Pardubice. And there's a almost 20-point gap between 5th and 12th, which you would expect with that many teams in that round. So, I mean, other than Mlada Boleslav, yeah, you can include Mountfield in there. Kind of 6th place after that, they're starting to see some gaps open. You've got a 5-point gap between Mountfield and Liberec, a 7-point gap between Liberec and Kometa, and then kind of from Kometa down to Pardubice, there's a couple of points here and there. So very much we're starting to see maybe the top half and the bottom half kind of split themselves here. Although we've got Olomouc and Cesc Budovic outside the playoffs, 17 points for Olomouc. So they're still very much in it. They could still make it to the playoffs. But Cesc Budovic, only 2 wins this season, 11 points on the year. They've got some overtime losses and everything like that. But 11 points in 19 games. They don't have any games in hand on any team except Sparta Prague, which they're not going to catch them anytime soon. They've got 26-point lead on them. And yeah, they're already 6 points out. So it's going to be an uphill battle for them to try and make it in. But you've got some teams going on some pretty impressive winning streaks and some teams going on some pretty bad losing streaks, right, Chris?
Yeah, so Mlada Boleslav on a 7-game winning streak and having won 8 out of the last 9 is one of the more impressive ones, up in 5th place. Karlovy Vary as well, they're on a 6-game winning streak, but they have won 9 out of the last 10. The one they lost, funnily enough, against Mlada Boleslav by 11 goals to 4. So quite a big defeat that they got handed to themselves there. But yeah, I mean, as you were going through it there, I was examining some of the gaps, and I'll just kind of elaborate on it just a little bit. So you mentioned obviously the gaps in the midfield. I mean, I'm looking now at Boleslav in 5th on 36 points. It's only a 4-point gap to Mountfield, but what I'm looking at is the 9-point gap down to Liberec in 7th. So there's 9 points between 5th and 7th, with Mountfield kind of in the middle. And then, as you said, there's another 7 points to Kometa Brno down in 20th. So you're talking 16 points between 5th and 8th, which means that it is kind of very much to me, it's kind of 5 at the top, 6 at the bottom, and then kind of 2 that are kind of in no man's land at the moment in Mountfield and Liberec. The other thing to mention is the tightness between Kometa Brno in 8th and Olomouc in 13th, which is 17 points. And don't forget that with the extra league being 3 points for a win, that's only 1 game separating 13th from 8th. So really quite close at the bottom, but I think you've got those 2 teams, as I mentioned, kind of in no man's land in the middle, and then you've kind of got a top 5 and bottom 6 with Cesc Budovic just kind of off the bottom.
Indeed. So that's the Czech Extraliga for you. Still plenty of games left to play there also. And like Chris said, we're kind of seeing a bit of a 4-horse race, then a 6-horse race, and then a couple of guys just kind of stuck there in the middle. And we'll see how they do over the next couple of games and see if they can jump themselves up as well. So next we have the Austrian League, I believe. Yes, we do. We have the Ice Hockey League in Austria. So this one, yeah, they're starting to see some gaps open up here as well. So we have Bolzano in first place, 37 points in 15 games. The Vienna Capitals, 34 points in 17 games. Klagenfurt with 32 points in 18 games. Verhava AV19 with 20 games played, the most games of any team so far this season, 31 points. And then you got the Graz 99ers on a 5-game losing streak, 30 points in 18 games. They're currently technically 10, 6 and 2, if you want to use like the NHL record way they do it. So we've got 7 points gap between 1st and 5th place for kind of the winner's stage, which I believe is only a couple of games difference, but still, Bolzano have only played 15 games so far this year, so they've got the games in hand, at least 2 or 3, even 5 games compared to Verhava AV19. So, you know, if Bolzano keep going on the run that they're on at the moment, where they kind of win 2 or 3, lose 1 or 2, then they should be okay sitting up there at the top of the standings. They put themselves in a good position. Then kind of in the loser stage, you've got Red Bull Salzburg, Dornbirn, Innsbruck, Bratislava, Villach, and Steinbach. And there's 25 points each for Salzburg and Dornbirn, although Salzburg have only played 13 games. They've got plenty of time to catch up, and I would expect them to be in the winner stage, considering they've won 4 straight games recently. Like, by the time they've caught up with some of their games, I would expect them to be in that top 5. Dornbirn and kind of the other teams, there's a 4-point gap between Dornbirn and Innsbruck, and then the rest of the teams, there isn't a huge amount of a gap, except for Steinbach, down at the bottom, 19 games played, 14 points, 1 win in their last 4. So, once again, another team that's got a real uphill battle. But it's looking like we're starting to get, the top 6 and the bottom 5 here, aren't we, Chris?
Yeah, again, I mean, I'll do what I've been doing and just elaborate a little bit on yours. So, obviously, Graz 99 is really struggling at the moment. 5-game losing streak, only picked up 2 points in their last game, including a heavy 10-2 defeat to Salzburg, which I mentioned last week. Of course, as you said, 10-2 and 6 using the NHL method. Can't quite do that over here in Europe, with 3 points for a win, true. 2 points for an overtime win. It doesn't quite match up the same, but it's I know what you're getting at. Salzburg, as you said, the team that have got games in hand on absolutely everybody. They had a tough time. They did have a 5-game losing streak where they really struggled to score, actually. They scored 1, 4, 5. They only scored 6 goals in 5 games.
Oh, wow.
Throughout a stretch here. But then they have really turned it around, scoring 23 goals in the last 4 games. So they have really turned that around. With a 5-3 victory, a 10-2 victory, and then 2 4-3 victories, 2 of them coming against Graz 99ers, which is one of the reasons why Graz have been struggling so much. The gaps, as you said, beginning to grow, the 5-point gap between 5th and 6th. Once you've got Salzburg with their games in hand, that's much easier to say a top 6 and a bottom 5 with that 5-point gap. Then with a further 4-point gap down to Innsbruck, you're really starting to see a difference there between the top and the bottom. So we'll see how that pans out when Salzburg are able to get their games in hand back up. Unfortunately for the Graz 99ers, their next game, which is in half an hour as we're recording this, is once again against Salzburg, who have beaten them on aggregate by, just do the mental maths, by 14 goals to 5 in the last 2 games.
Oh. And this is why you need Ben's bounds in the net.
To be fair, the last game did go to a penalty shootout.
Okay.
But yes, the Salzburg have really kind of got Graz's number, and considering that they're playing them, 3 times in the space of a week and a half?
Oh.
It's not good for Graz, but hopefully they might be able to get something from our point of view with Ben Bounds. Anyway, hopefully they might be able to get something from the game that's on tonight.
Indeed. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I guess Graz 99ers fans will either be happy or they'll be sad. Such is the way that hockey goes, folks. Next up, we have the Polish League. We're getting towards the kind of the smaller European leagues at the moment now. So next up, we have the Polish League, which obviously we've been keeping an eye on since its very beginning. So most of the teams, bar 1, have played 23 games. Bar 2, sorry, played 23 games this season. Jastrzębie sitting up at the top with a 5-game winning streak, 57 points in 23 games. Tichy with 53 points in 23 games themselves, so only 4-point difference. So that's 2 wins, a win and an overtime loss. So it's not a huge amount of difference between these 2 teams. And like we said last week, it's very much a 2-horse race in the Polish League. Then you've got Torun with 42 points in 22 games. Una Oświęcim, obviously Eliza Sherbatov's team, 41 points in 23 games. Katowice, 40 points in 23 games. Then you've got Podhale, 39 points in 22 games. Krakow, 38 points in 23 games, and Sanok, 20 points in 23 games. So, once again, top 2 are way out above. Then you've got 3rd to 7th that are kind of fighting for position, because there's only a 4-point difference between 3rd and 7th. Then you've got Sanok just kind of sitting there comfortably in the 8th spot. And then Zagłębie and Gdansk, both with 6 points on the season in 23 games each. I think we've pretty much decided how this season's going to go, Chris, if you ask me. It's just a case of, where the 3rd to 7th teams end up and whether Jastrzębie or Tichy wins the league.
So Zagłębie on a 16-game losing streak at the bottom. Dansk are only on a 5-game losing streak because they managed to get a victory against Unai Oswiecim a couple of weeks ago. You may remember we mentioned it.
Yep.
And Jastrzębie at the top, as we said, they're on a 12-game winning streak now. So much more than the 5 that the screen shows. They got a shutout against Unai Oswiecim on the 4th, and then a 6-2 victory against Sanok on the 6th. So they're really doing well at the moment, really putting games to bed by the middle period, really, from the look at these scores. So yeah, Jastrzębie really getting out in front. I mean, as you've said, I'll just echo them again. 2 teams that in front, really getting away from it, as you mentioned, then kind of the midfield between 3rd and 7th. Sanok in kind of no man's land. They need quite a good run to get up towards 7th, but I wouldn't say that it's really possible. I mean, that's 6 games already that they've got to win, and hope Krakow don't pick anything up just to kind of get up there. And it's a tall order, really, considering their record of 6-1-0 and 16. And obviously the 2 at the bottom are the 2 at the bottom. It's almost just a 8-team league at the moment. You could argue 7-team league.
Yeah, I think kind of a 7-team league with 2 teams that are probably going to win it, and the other sort of 4 teams, 5 teams battling for position, really. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it and you get like Sanok, who are in no man's land in 8th, are going to come up against Jastrzębie or Tichy in the first round of the playoffs. And then like that's it for their playoffs, isn't it? Really?
Well,
unless something incredible happens.
Yeah,
but...
as you would expect, or if Sanok decide to go on a miracle run and win the Polish League playoffs, I guess I'll have to wait and see. You know, sports is a funny thing; they like to go crazy. So now we've got the Danish Metaligaen coming up next, which 9-team league. Once again, with the 0.5 points sitting up there, so we explained why that's the case last week, so if you were a little bit confused, maybe go and check out the previous one. Essentially, the TLDR, a load of games had to be postponed, and they gave each team 0.5 points that the game were postponed, and they counted it each as a win, which is why the numbers don't necessarily add up as much. So, Rungsted we have in first place with 50.5 points, Aalborg 48 points in 22 games played, Esbjerg 45.5 in 21, Blue Fox with 39.5, Frederikshavn 36.5, Sondersjijk with 30, so very much a kind of 1-5 split, and then a 6-9 split, if you want to call it that, because, to be honest, you've got Herlev in 7th with 23.5 points, the Mighty Bulls with 20.5, and then the Odense Bulldogs sitting outside with 8 points difference between them and the 8th place Mighty Bulls, 12 points in 24 games. So, very much, we can kind of say it's a 3-horse race for the top of the standings at the moment. Esbjerg, maybe not so much, but they do have a game in hand on Aalborg and 2 games in hand on Rungsted, so they could easily put themselves back up into the race, being 5 points back. Aalborg very much sitting up there with a chance to take it as well. Then kind of 4th to 6th, you've got a bit of a race there, but maybe not so much. Maybe 4th and 5th kind of battling for position because they're only 3 points difference between them. Then kind of Sondersjijk, like, to kind of echo what Chris has said, in no man's land again. They're kind of 6.5 points back from Frederikshavn and 6.5 points above Herlev, so it's kind of like, okay, well, they're sitting comfortably there for the time being. It's important to mention that Frederikshavn, 5-game winning streak at least, Sondersjijk and Herlev, 5-game losing streaks at least, and then the Odense Bulldogs with a 5-game losing streak at least also, and then the Mighty Bulls kind of sitting there trying to get up above Herlev. Odense, yeah, you could argue it would just take a couple of games to get them back into it, but at the same time, that's also being dependent on the other teams above them not playing very well, which you could argue, yeah, they're not at the moment, but, you know, Odense hasn't been playing particularly well either. This could have been a really good chance for them to pick up a few wins here and there and, you know, get themselves back into the race, but it's kind of looking like we're seeing this league establish its hierarchy, aren't we, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, Odense's losing streak is now 9 games, so not great there. Herlev's is only 5, and Sondersjik's is also only 5. But I think this league has really split in the last couple of weeks. You look at the form guide, and you look at when obviously all the fixtures took place, and you've got your top 5 who have won at least 4 out of the last 5, and then you look at the bottom who between 4 teams have won 2 out of the last 20 games. And then you consider the 2 that Rodover have won. One of them was against Odense, so you can almost kind of count that out. But again, as you said, teams at the top in the top 5, Sonderjyk in no man's land, and then the teams at the bottom. Odense have got a big mountain to climb to get into the playoffs at all.
Pretty much. So I would imagine the hierarchy is going to pretty much stay the same. Maybe 1 or 2 teams change position. I think very much in terms of the title race, how Esbjerg does in the next couple of games is going to decide whether it's a little bit closer in a 3-horse race or whether it's a 2-horse race with Aalborg and Rungsted. Next up, we have it's the Norwegian League, isn't it? Yes, the Norway League, the Fjord Ligaen. So we have Frisk Asker up in first place, 43 points in 17 games. They've got a 7-point lead already on Vålerenga in second with 36 points. 35 points is Storhamar, 30 points is Stavanger. So basically got first place, then second and third place battling it out. They've still got the chance to make it. Stavanger up there with 30 points in 17 games for fourth place. Lillehammer, 29 points in 16 games. They're kind of fourth and fifth, battling it out as well. Then you've got kind of the next 3 teams, then the last 2 teams, because you've got Sturgeon, 20 points in 17 games for 6th place. Then you've got Mangelrud, 19 points in 15 games. Got a couple of games in hand, to be fair. But also Sparta Sarpsborg, 16 points, but they do have at least 3, 4, or even 5 games in hand. So if they go on a bit of a winning streak, they won 3 of their last 5. So if they keep that kind of pace up for the next few games, they should see themselves maybe go up to 7th, maybe even 6th, maybe even get closer to 5th even. And then you've got Gruna and Narvik way outside the playoff race, especially Narvik. 18 games played, more games than any other team. 5 points on the year, just 2 wins, 1 win in regulation, 1 win in overtime or a shootout. 5 points on the season. They've allowed pretty much double the amount of goals that they've scored. And then Gruna, 7 points in 14 games, lost 5 straight. So, yeah, once again, we're now getting to the point in the season for a lot of these leagues where the teams that are outside of the playoffs, especially in the kind of lesser-known European leagues, a lot of these teams that are outside of the playoffs or in the relegation zone, they're really far away from competing anytime soon, right, Chris?
Yeah, it strikes me, and we have had this in the UK as well, and now looking at the European leagues in detail each week is opening my eyes to it again, where in these countries where ice hockey kind of isn't as strong as in the KHL, in the NHL, all the rest of it, you've got teams who are just not as high a quality that are almost there to make the numbers up.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound the best way of saying it, but you know, when you consider that you've got Dansk and Zaglaby in that league who can only beat each other and are way off the pace. You've got Narvik and Gruna here who are way off the pace. We had it in the UK when you had Edinburgh who were way off the pace.
Yes.
And it almost feels like they're there just to make the numbers up. And I suppose that a lot of the other teams, particularly if you're kind of like Frisk Asker, I suppose, you go to these teams and think, well, we'll come back and we'll take a few points back down with us. Thank you very much. I know that there's teams that come to Nottingham to face the Lions and think that. So yeah, we'll go to the Lions and we'll go back with 2 points because there's no chance that they're gonna do anything.
Yeah.
So it is difficult, and I think that's almost the problem that we've got with this relegation between leagues, and it's almost where the elite league and these leagues that don't have the promotion relegation almost do better, because you've got teams that win the second division, which is a completely different class and has completely different monetary levels to the top division. They get promoted into the top division and they just can't get the caliber of players and just end up seesawing and going straight back down again. So, well, I mean, as you said, we pretty much know as we do elsewhere already, the 8 teams in the playoffs, it's more just what order the teams are going to be in, but there's that 9-point gap already between Lillehammer in 5th and Sturgeon in 6th. So will that grow? Will that shrink? We'll have to kind of see on that one.
Pretty much. I couldn't really said it better myself. So the last league that we usually look at is the French League Magnus. So I'm going to just bring up their stats as it stands right now. Some of you might notice hasn't really been a huge amount of change within the League Magnus standings recently. Chris, would you like to explain why? Because I think you know a little bit more about this than I do, so go for it.
Yeah, nothing's happening.
Oh, is that
in the shop? I'll just get it back up and let it. My French isn't as good as I'll get Google to translate.
Oh yeah. Get Google Translate.
Basically, everything's being postponed.
Okay.
Now we've got So where are we today? We're on the 9th. So tomorrow, we've got one game, which is supposedly happening anyway.
Okay.
Between, come on, stupid thing. Between, it just takes forever, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
When I click on full schedule, it just only. So.
Do you need to vamp while you get it up, or?
No. So we've just got so many problems, and everything's kind of being postponed. There's no other real way of saying it. So we're supposed to have a game for Briançon against Rouen on tomorrow, which was actually meant to be game 17, and it's actually tomorrow. And then we've got a game on the 12th, which is meant to be somewhere. I have no idea where, because the days mean this is the French league for you. I don't understand quite what it's doing, but it's just basically they've cancelled everything. Yeah. Basically, that's. And there's nothing happening, and so we're not really going to talk about the French league either.
Pretty much. So this segment of the podcast that you've just seen is called "British Man Gets Annoyed at the French." ... again. So there you go.
Well, it's not behaving the way it behaved when I showed you it the other day.
Oh, I know. It's always like you managed to get it right one time, and then it never wants to do it ever again for the life of it, ever, forever. So we're going to skip the French league as well. Pretty much. So obviously, it's important to mention that there was a national lockdown in France. That's been a huge factor as to why the French league didn't run for a long time. Now, obviously, there's the COVID cases still sitting there in the league, and all of these problems arising still. So it's very much a situation that it's very touch and go in France at the moment for French hockey.
So just to sum it up, so we should be on round 21.
Okay.
On Friday, and they're all postponed.
Right.
Instead, on Friday, there's one game from round 17.
Okay.
Which I'm guessing got postponed.
Yeah.
Then on Sunday, there's a game from round 43.
Okay. Right.
Then we're jumping to round 22, which are all postponed.
Right.
Then round 23, and they're all postponed.
Okay.
Then we've got one game on the 20th, which is round 25.
Okay.
And then also on the 20th is a round 23 game that's already been postponed.
Right.
Then two other games are on the 20th. One which is round 4, and one which is round 1.
Okay.
And then we get to Christmas, and we jump back to round 15, and then there's a couple that are round 7 on New Year's Eve, and I don't know.
So to summarise, the French league is in a bit of a shambles at the moment, whether it be to the national lockdowns or other postponements, and they're in the process of trying to figure things out. And once they figure it out, we'll figure it out and let you guys know. Problem solved.
Yeah.
That's the French league. That's pretty much all we had to talk about that. Now, there's one more league that we're actually going to talk about this week, because obviously it's the week before they are actually going to play hockey again, which we mentioned obviously last episode. And that is, of course, the German DEL. So the German DEL is starting up next week. Should be, as the podcast goes out, we should be looking at kind of the time that the DEL will be underway. When we next record, it won't necessarily be out, because if we record it about a week from now, it'll be the 16th, and they start the 19th, I think. Was that right? The 19th they start? I can't remember off the top of my head.
No, they start on the 16th. So it's a week today, so it's a week on Wednesday. So this podcast is the last that's going out before.
Yes. I wasn't sure if it would be the last that we're recording before it goes out as well. So we're going to talk about it now anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So, Chris, do you want to just take us through the German DEL standings from last season to basically take us quickly through all of the different teams that are in the DEL? We obviously talked about it in a bit of detail last episode, but to kind of give everybody a crash course on the German league, because obviously it's been in the public eye with the NHL over the last couple of months, and kind of get everybody up to speed as well as us. So go for it.
Yep, so for those who were aware last week, I'll brush on it briefly. For those who didn't listen to last week's podcast, go and listen to last week's, because we go into this in more detail.
Yep.
But they're splitting the league into North and South try and minimise any potential risks from the virus and travelling and all the rest of it. And then they're going to do, so at the moment they're only doing inter-conference matches, and then in the new year they're going to look at doing the cross-conference matches. So there are a grand total of 14 teams. We have Adler Mannheim, Augsburger Panther, Dusseldorf, EHC München, which many people will know as Red Bull Munich, Isbaron Berlin, Ingolstadt, the Fishtown Penguins, Grizzlies Wolfsburg, the Aslon Roosters, Krefeld Penguin, Kölner High, Nuremberg Ice Tigers, the Schweinige Wild Wings, and the Straubing Tigers. Now, last season, it's Red Bull Munich who are the defending champions. They finished 6 points clear of anybody else. Obviously, the playoffs cancelled last year, followed by Adler Mannheim and the Straubing Tigers. And the gaps did start to open up after Berlin in fourth. There was then a 9-point gap down to Dusseldorf in fifth. Relatively close league. The team at the bottom, the Schweinige Wild Wings, 45 points. They found themselves just shy of 30 points away from the playoffs. But a much closer league than some of the other leagues that we've been talking about already on this podcast. I mean, only 17 points between third and eighth, and over a 52-game season with 3 points for a win. You can see why, where that came from, really. So yeah, that's the German league, really. I mean, if you want to go into some ridiculous details, apparently, according to Elite Prospects, the heaviest team, don't know why you need to know this, but the heaviest team in the DL this year are the Augsburger Panthers and the Nuremberg Ice Tigers. And the youngest team is Krefeld Penguin.
Okay. Interesting. So that's a bit of a crash course in the German DL. Obviously, they will join the long list of leagues that we look at every single week. We'll probably slot them in somewhere between the Czech Extraliga and the Swiss National League is probably the right place to put them. Probably be a kind of the fifth or sixth team that we look at every week, because they're one of the higher teams up there within Europe. Certainly on par with something like the Czech Extraliga, and they're certainly higher than the Austrian League or the Polish League. Exactly. So, yeah, that's the DL. I mean, there isn't really a huge amount we need to talk about right now because we went in a lot of detail as to their plans.
No, it's not started.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm not aware of any pre-season taking place or any...
there is. They have been doing... they've been playing a cup competition. Mm-hmm. So rather than the league, they've been doing the cup. Let me just have a look at this. So that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. So there's the Penguins are top. Okay. Games played 6, points 17th, points per game 2.8. I don't. Yeah, they've been playing some preseason games and they've been relatively close.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is British man shouts at the French and then goes on to shout at the English.
To be honest, I think a lot of the misunderstanding is Google Translate.
Oh yes, yeah.
I don't think can deal with the table very well.
So basically, you've heard it here first. It's never Chris's fault. But anyway, I've just noticed. I've only just noticed this now, Chris, and I cannot believe it took me this long to notice it. That I have put on our YouTube version. I've put your window under my name and my window under your name. I think we must have done that the same last week as well. How funny is that? I've literally just noticed it.
Look at last week's now.
I've literally just noticed that 48 minutes into this recording. That's wonderful.
48. We really need to speed up again.
No, we're doing all right, all things considered, because now we've just got a few little news pieces to look at, because we've looked at all of the...
Let me have a look.
That is so funny. I literally sat here, and while you were talking, I was looking at your name on the thing, and then I looked up and was like, okay, so Chris is there. And then I looked at the top of the screen, it says Odd Man Rush at the top, and I thought, hang on a minute, wait, I'm supposed to be there, and Chris is supposed to be here.
Yeah, you did that last week as well, you muppet. It's okay when we're doing the side-by-side. It's only when you've got a screen up. You absolute donut.
That is the most wonderful thing. That's made my week.
Professionalism.
I've always wanted to be you, Chris, so now I finally got the chance, and here we are. So that was the German DEL. Let's talk about Chris's predictions for the last week. So I'll take you through the December 7th to 13th predictions. Then, Chris, if you want to update us with the results from last week and and the scores and stuff. So I'll give you time to do that. So the 10 games that Chris has selected for the predictions. Those who don't know, Sunday/Monday morning, Chris gets 10 different games from across Europe and says, guys, go and predict on them. And you get 1 point for the correct winner, 3 points for a perfect score. And remember, guys, it's just for fun. So, the first game, the Vienna Capitals against Klagenfurter. Then you had Mountfield against Motorsesk Budějovic. HC Sochi against Kowloon Red Star. The Malmo Redhawks against Oskarshamn. The Herlev Eagles against the Odense Bulldogs. Una Oshkoshim against MMKS Podhale. Narvik against Storhamar. Barani Zlin against Litvinov, Akbars Kazan against Jokerit, and Lugano against the Rapperswil Jona Lakers. So basically, we had all of our people that follow us on Twitter or Instagram. They go and comment what they think the scores are going to be for each of these 10 games. And depending on how many teams they got with the correct winner or how many scores they got perfect for the two sides, then you get points. And they get tallied up as the season goes along. And then at some point, we'll reveal the winner. And the winner will maybe get something, or they'll feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. It's one or the other. We haven't quite figured out what the prize is going to be. But Chris, do you want to take us through the updated scores as of the 7th of December?
Yeah, can do. So last week we lost a couple of games due to postponements, and we're going to lose games this week as well. The game 10 this week, Lugano against Lakers, has already been called off.
Okay.
If the game gets called off, I just wipe it from that week. It's the fairest way to do it.
Yeah, of course.
So yes, last week it was a tie for the win between Prague Hockey Freak and Stash, who both got 6 points. We lost 3 games last week. It was a bit of a lower week score-wise. A couple of games that we weren't quite expecting. It was actually the overtime. The fact that Stash and Prague both said that the Sunday's game last week was going to go to overtime, which meant they had the tie. So they had a 2-point victory over Henrik. The rolling tally still gives Henrik the lead by a single point now. Bear in mind, you can get up to 4 points per game. A single point really is nothing. 1 point behind him is Prague Hockey Freak, and 1 point behind him is Stash. So only 2 points separating kind of what are the people that have played every week, the top and the bottom.
So there you go, folks. If you want to get involved in that as well, whenever Chris posts it on our Twitter or Instagram, go and comment on there and you'll add yourself to the list.
I have an alarm set on my phone for 9 o'clock every Sunday morning. So kind of GMT, roughly around 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, the predictions will be posted, and then we'll do it again on the Monday.
Well, there you go, folks. So that's the predictions and the upcoming games that we're going to look at for the predictions. Let's move on to some news, because we've got a few things we want to talk about, and we've got about enough time to talk about it. Kind of a few smaller pieces of news, and then kind of one bigger one that we're going to go into a bit more detail with. So the first piece of news I want to look at is the Elite Ice Hockey League announced their support for a unified national governing body for ice hockey in the UK. Now, obviously, we talked a lot in detail last week about the £4 million that the English government have given to the Elite Ice Hockey League for the English teams in order for them to play a season, which should be happening at some point in January as far as the rumours are aware. We'll keep you updated in terms of what's going on there. But let me just read you a statement that was made by the Elite League yesterday. Chris and I had a little chat about this, and then we'll get Chris's thoughts on this, because he's obviously a little bit more keyed up in the Elite League and the behind-the-scenes stuff than what I am. So, the Elite League welcomes the proposed new national governing body to govern ice hockey in the UK and supports the unification process currently ongoing. Having a coordinated approach across the country can only be a good thing for the future of the sport, and the Elite Ice Hockey League would look forward to working with new NGB and opening the channels of communication to ensure we drive our sport forward under a unified approach. The recent application for government support has shown that we can... The recent application for government support has shown what can be achieved when we work together for the benefit of the sport, and the Elite Ice Hockey League looks forward to playing its part alongside the new structure of governance, I should say, in UK ice hockey. So that is the statement that they put out. Now, it's interesting they mentioned the recent application for government support has achieved what we can do when we work together for the benefit of the sport. As far as I'm aware, the only people that are getting funding for that are the Elite League. So is that the benefit of the sport or the benefit of the Elite League, Chris?
Well, I mean, it's not even the whole Elite League.
Yeah, exactly.
So, no, I mean, I'll gloss over it because I'm obviously conscious that we spent a lot of time talking Elite League, and whilst I have been like looking at it, there are more people that are more knowledgeable than me, and I could talk about it for hours, and it's probably better for an Elite League podcast. But for people outside that are looking in, the British ice hockey has got. So you've got the Elite League. You've also then got the English Ice Hockey Association, the EIHL, who deal with everything from the National League down. Then you've got like Scotland as well. It's got their own as well, and they've got Scottish National Leagues and that sort of thing. So there is talk, and then there's another group that have come up, the English Ice Hockey Community, the EIHC. Who have very strong opinions on quite a lot of things that I'm not going to go into.
Okay.
Because they put an article out the other day, and I swear it was as long as my uni dissertation, and it was quite a read.
Okay.
So the plan is to have a national governing body, kind of like the FA in football, or if you can imagine, like the IIHF, but only for one country, just have one body that deals with it all. So that's kind of the intention. I think that, I mean, my gut instinct is that having one body to deal with all of it would be better.
Yes, I completely agree.
I think they could deal with, they could deal with the whole pyramid of ice hockey much better. So I'll have to wait and see what comes of it. And so we're probably going to be looking at after Christmas now, as we are a lot of the stuff that we're discussing. So hopefully it'll go well. But to have like the Elite League and the National Leagues underneath, all under one body, I think will really help.
I couldn't agree more. I think the fact that I was going to say, as you were going on talking about the different bodies that govern different parts of hockey within the UK, it's confusing. And that just goes to show you that, like, we need something a little bit less confusing, a little bit more streamlined. Yeah, it might cause some issues for certain bits down the line. And obviously, I'm not the most keyed up person within the Elite League to talk about this. It's just kind of going on base what I've seen as a fan. I feel like whether it's grassroots hockey and kind of getting people into the sport and kind of developing them to hopefully go to the Elite League at some point, there needs to be a more secure process for something like that, as far as I'm aware. Because it's very much like, in some ways, it kind of feels like the Wild West a little bit, where you're kind of left to deal with it on your own and kind of get lucky and kind of find the right opportunities to be able to have that chance, especially for the homegrown players. As we see, like, the Elite Ice Hockey League is a predominantly import sport. Now, that's obviously to bring the level of and the overall kind of quality of the game on the ice up. But also, I don't think there's going to be anything lost on kind of having a unified approach with every single different association. I guess it just depends on what's every single group getting out of it. Is there going to be... Because I saw a lot of fan response, or I saw a few comments on Twitter, which obviously might not be the overwhelming majority, but it's important to play devil's advocate in things like this, kind of being like, why do the Elite League want to do this? Like, what are they going to get out of this? They don't really need to do this right now. It's kind of like, what's in it for them? So there's kind of a bit of trepidation from some people to be like, okay, there must be something really good coming in for the Elite League for them to want to do this. Now, that might just be the cynics within the English hockey community, or the UK hockey community, the GB hockey community, if you want to be precise. Or it might just be a case of they're just kind of shooting their shot and kind of saying what they feel like, which, they're well within their right to do. I guess we're just going to have to see what comes of this. Will there be a united governing body? Maybe there will, maybe there won't. I guess we'll have to see how that develops in the following weeks and months, like Chris said, and see after Christmas and into the new year whether there's progress made on this, whether it completely collapses and it's the status quo. So, yeah, that's pretty much all we really need to talk about with that. So next, we've got a bit of sad news for fans of IIHF President René Fassel, which I'm sure there are some people out there. I don't think he's that bad. Some people probably don't like him. Some international hockey fans probably think he's like the Gary Bettman of Europe, but, Gary Bettman does his job very well. Whether you like him or love him or hate him, So anyway, René Fassel, the IIHF president, is isolating at home after contracting COVID-19. He cancelled his upcoming trip and cited safety issues affecting plans for the 2021 Men's Hockey World Championships. This article is from CBC, and they also go into the current situation as well. We've obviously talked about it a lot on our bonus clips on YouTube, which you should definitely go and listen to if you get the opportunity. But it reads as follows. Under pressure to remove Belarus as co-host of next year's Men's World Championship, the International Ice Hockey Federation said Tuesday a working trip to Minsk was cancelled because its 2 top officials have become infected with COVID-19. The governing body said President René Fassel and General Secretary Horst Lichtner, I hope I pronounced that right, both tested positive for the virus ahead of travelling to meet Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Lukashenko has described hockey as, quote, an ideology in Belarus and has played the sport with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The authoritarian leader of Belarus was suspended by the International Olympic Committee on Monday from Olympic activities, including the Tokyo Games, during an investigation into athletes' claims they have faced reprisals for protesting against his dispute's re-election. So obviously that's going into the politics of all of it. I'm not really particularly that interested in the politics. We've talked about it a lot within certain situations. But essentially the main news being the IIHF president and who is it as well, the general secretary, have gone down with COVID. Is that going to have a huge impact on things moving forwards? Well, provided they make a full recovery, I wouldn't think so. They've been very careful, like Chris and I have mentioned. Especially Chris has been very keen to highlight when the fact they've been very safe and had been patient with kind of laying out the overall landscape, and I think rightly so. Couldn't have agreed with you more. So, Chris, the news that René Fassel contracted COVID-19. Anything you want to add on it? It's not really a huge news story, but something I figured that was worth mentioning.
I mean, obviously we hope he gets better soon.
Of course, absolutely.
I think in terms of the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to make that much of an impact as long as he's not like really long-term ill, because most people are recovering in 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. So they just kind of have the meeting early in the new year instead. But it keeps getting closer and closer. There has been the talk about it moving to Russia, and we've been seeing quite actively on our social media about how Russia shouldn't be hosting stuff because of this ban, and are the IIHF ignoring it because of anti-doping and all of that. And again, we could talk about that for about an hour, and we won't. Because that's not relevant to this story. We'll have a look at it, and when the time comes. But hopefully he gets recovered nice and quickly, and we can have these meetings early in the new year, and something gets sorted. Because I remember we spoke about this a good couple of months ago, nearly 3 months ago now, back in September when we started doing this podcast, and we were saying, they don't need to kind of make any rash decisions because it's still a long way away. And now you're kind of in mid-December, you're talking January before they get a chance to really have a meeting again. And then it's only kind of 4 months away, and you're thinking, okay, well, that's half the time gone now, and we don't appear to be any closer than we were 4 months ago.
As I was actually quite literally going to say that after you'd finished, because we've been like, oh, don't worry, guys, there's plenty of time, but now there isn't as much time. And like you mentioned, we're halfway through. So obviously, from the outside looking in, it doesn't look like there's been a huge amount of progress. To be perfectly honest, there hasn't been a huge amount of progress in terms of big steps being taken or decisions on whether Belarus are going to co-host it, whether Russia's going to get it, whether they're going to give it to another country or vice versa. However, I would imagine there's been a lot of discussion over these last few months. Fassel's obviously been travelling to Belarus, to Latvia, to Russia, supposedly to meet Trechak and kind of discuss the possibility of having Russia host it as well. So essentially, there's a lot of little puzzle pieces that are being put in place behind the scenes over the last few months, but the full puzzle picture isn't quite done yet. So, it's probably going to be a little while. I would imagine kind of by end of February, they will have had an official decision on what's going on, because if they leave it any later than that, they're going to kind of cause a lot of problems for themselves, I think. So, hopefully both Fassel and Lichtner both get well soon. Hopefully within the next week or two we hear the news that they've recovered and they're doing fine. So, because obviously René Fassel has been a staple with the IIHF for as long as I can remember, and I look at hockey history quite often. So we're talking back to the Soviet Union days, he was still quite involved in it as well. So it's been a while since Fassel has not been in that role, and we hope he continues and stays healthy for a long period of time, because he's pretty good for that institution. Now, let's talk about the biggest kind of news I wanted to discuss on here, and this is the World Junior Championships taking place in a couple of weeks' time. So, Josh Tesler, who, for those of you who are unaware, I'll get up his bio if it will let me do it. He is the director of scouting for Smart Scouting. He's an NHL/junior hockey draft scout and data tracker, and he loves baseball, and he's Montreal born, so there you go, folks. So he's made a list, a comprehensive list, as of yesterday, at 3 p.m. our time. Players who will not be in Edmonton for the World Junior Championships due to leaving their teams due to COVID-19. And you have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 players. You have a 2021 eligible draft pick. You have 3 different Detroit Red Wings prospects, 1 New York Rangers prospect, 3 different Chicago Blackhawks prospects, and an Anaheim Ducks prospect. So you've got 9 different players from several different teams across the World Junior Championship landscape that do not have players going because of COVID. Now, COVID has been something that's been affecting several of these teams now. Sweden's been hit quite bad with it the last couple of weeks. Canada's certainly been hit badly because one of our former guests of the show and a good friend of the show, Caitlin Berry, also tweeted out yesterday, much later, Matthew Robertson, Mason Millman, Xavier Simoneau, Damian Hunt, and Ridley Grieg have all been released from Hockey Canada's selection camp after being deemed unfit to continue. The decision is based on health protocols. So, not only have we had the 9 players that were mentioned in the previous tweet, we now have another 6 different players from Team Canada alone that aren't able to take part because of COVID or because of health, the health situation or whatever. So, Chris, that opens up a really big can of worms and a big question as to whether the World Junior Championships this year should go ahead. Now, obviously, we're like 2 weeks away from it. It's going to go ahead. Do you think this was the right decision in the long run? Obviously, we need to wait and decide, kind of see whether there's any more players that get hit with it as the tournament goes along. Because as we've seen, whether it be the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, the NHL, players do get hit with it during the play. Obviously, the bubble situation will help, but we're going to be in a situation where there could be 1 or 2 players that end up leaving as the tournament goes ahead because they might have COVID. Hopefully not, but you never know. What are your thoughts on the current news that there's about 15 different players at the moment that aren't going to be taking part in the World Junior Championships due to COVID?
Yeah, I mean, having them announced now is good because obviously they're doing this bubble, they're doing this isolation thing beforehand to try and stop this. We've had Josh Tester also put out that Swedish head coach Thomas Monten's tested positive. So what that means for Team Sweden, we don't know.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. And I think obviously we've seen that here in the UK, we've just started putting vaccines in. I saw it go earlier that Canada have also deemed that the vaccine that we've got, is it Pfizer?
Yeah, Pfizer, I think it is Pfizer.
Pfizer, that's it. Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
They've also deemed that safe, so they're going to start administering that. So I think it's just, as people have been saying, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's still a decent chunk away by the time we've got everybody sorted. I mean, it's great for, it means the teams have got to look for other people.
Yeah.
So it's great for some that were perhaps on the fringe and just missed out. Because I think the World Junior Championships there's a lot of players I think that will play in the World Junior Championships that may then not play in the World Championships.
Yeah.
Representing the men. So see that it's gutting for them if they feel they've missed their opportunity to represent the country. Should the World Championships go ahead? I think because they're doing it in a bubble and they're taking precautions, I kind of think it should. And I think the IIHF are obviously trying to use this as a kind of a Kickstarter for the World Championships.
Yeah.
So they're trying to kind of almost use this as a test run in kind of the best sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and obviously it starts on Boxing Day, Christmas Day. So there's still time away to get people in and to get them tested and isolated and everything. So, hopefully we'll still have a good tournament that was much like the NHL playoffs, really. And the reports that come out twice a week that say no tests all the time because the bubble is working as it should.
Absolutely. I think kind of 2 things based on what you said. I think there's a lot of these players that have had to leave the selection camp that this might be the best place they reach in their hockey careers. There's a lot of players that represent their country at the World Junior Championships that don't go on to play in the NHL, let alone become a serviceable player that plays 5-10 years in the league, earns a couple $1 million and, manages to carve themselves a good career. Yeah, they might go and play in some of the minor leagues or might go to Europe and things, but kind of playing at the World Junior Championships representing Team Canada or Team Sweden might be the height of their NHL or the height of their hockey careers, and the fact that might be taken away from them due to a virus really sucks for them. And I kind of feel for them because, especially because they're 16, 17, usually 17, 18-year-olds that are at the tournament, maybe 19-year-olds as well. They're kids, they're emotional, this means a lot to them. It's kind of like they might have spent their last few seasons training being like, I want to represent Team Canada at the World Junior Championships, and that opportunity has been taken away from them. So kind of for the guys that have had to leave the bubble that obviously would have liked to have stayed, it really does suck for them, and I really do feel for them. But at the same time, like you said, Chris, it's kind of a trial run for the World Championships. The World Junior Championships is one of the biggest events that the IIHF runs every single year. There's no way in hell that they're going to cancel this, especially at this point down the road. Unless every single team gets hit with half their players down with the illness, I don't think the tournament's going to be cancelled because there's too much riding on it at this point and we're too close to it now to kind of cancel it. I guess the question becomes then, Chris, because so many different players, whether it be from Canada, Sweden, Germany's had a couple of players hit by it as far as I'm aware as well, it's not going to be the same calibre potentially as some of the previous World Championships. Obviously, Alexei Lafreniere of the New York Rangers, he's not going. Capo Kakko of the New York Rangers isn't going for Finland. Kirby Dack is going, who was obviously the third overall pick, not this recent draft, but the one before. He's been part of the Team Canada team since the very beginning, so there's a lot of discussion as to whether Kakko and Lafreniere and a couple of these other highly touted prospects that have already played in the tournament. Lafreniere won gold, obviously, last year. Is there really anything they need to prove? They obviously... they're with NHL teams now, and the NHL teams will want to protect their assets now. They're not really that bothered about them going to play for their country and get another injury like Lafreniere did last year. I guess it's a case of a lot of these good, highly talented, future NHL most likely players are now ending up being outside of the bubble and they're not going to be able to attend the tournament. Are we going to see the overall quality of the on-ice play be affected by these differences? And do you think the World Junior Championships will suffer? Do you think it will be remembered as one that wasn't necessarily as good as it could have been? Obviously, there's a lot of things that go into that, but do you think this might negatively impact the World Junior Championships and kind of the overall quality of the hockey that's available this year, Chris?
My gut instinct is that I don't think so. I think that just because a few players are missing doesn't mean that the whole tournament is of a lower quality. It's it's again, I'm going to bring it back to football. Are some people going to say, oh well, this World Cup is rubbish because Ronaldo didn't play or Messi didn't play?
Fair.
And I think no, because I think one person doesn't make a team, and I think there are a lot of people and players that are still going to this championship who are still of a high quality. And don't forget, obviously, that with ice hockey, because of the way it works and the lines and everything, even if you've got a star player who's the best player in the world, he's only on the ice for like a third of the time.
Yeah.
So I think, for 2/3 of the time, the hockey is exactly the same whether he's on the ice or not.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to affect the play too much. I think that the players are still going to give it their all. They're going to enjoy it. We're still going to have great players, great young players with promising futures ahead of them, taking to the ice in their national team jerseys. And I think it's still going to be considered the tournament that it always is.
To be honest, you could also make the flip side of that argument that the players will cherish this opportunity that little bit more than they do compared to other years because they know they've really had to battle through not just the players on the roster, but they've also had to battle through an illness that's out there that's limited some potential players from either taking their spot or competing for the same spot. And also, I think given the current situation with the NHL, obviously the rumours are now that the NHL, there's been talks about a January 13th start with a 56-game season, not confirmed by the league just yet.
Yes, and a Canada-only division I saw as well.
Yes, indeed, which should be very fun to watch, especially for Canadian fans. But also, I could imagine this might be the most viewed World Junior Championships in quite a long time because there's no NHL hockey competing with it. Whereas usually we have NHL games running in between. It's kind of, for Canadians, so the Canadians love watching the World Junior Championships because they win it more often than not. And then also you've got the kind of the Swedens, the Finlands, the Switzerlands, kind of, there's a lot of other solid nations with solid fan bases behind them. I think we could see an opportunity where all of these different nations around the world, as well as the hockey fans from the nations that aren't represented, like the UK, for example, we don't have a league running up at the moment. So if we have the opportunity to watch the World Junior Championships, we want some hockey at the end of the day. So, like, we'll take it, you know? We'll get to see some future NHL players, prospects of our favourite teams going up against each other. You know, I think this could end up being one of the more popular World Junior Championships, just given the kind of context that it's being played under. So it's kind of, you can look at it one way and be like, oh, like the quality might not be necessarily as good, or oh, there's loads of players that are missing out on this opportunity. But also at the same time, there's a lot of other opportunities that are being opened up because of it. So I would love to have the chance to see the World Junior Championships over here in the UK. I never usually watch it that often. It's more kind of keeping up to date with it post games that have been played and everything like that. But I think given the fact that we've been so starved of hockey, especially in North America all year, like, let's get some games going. Let's watch the World Junior Championships. Let's see some good hockey. The UK or Team Great Britain's not going to be in it, so we can kind of cheer for any team we want. So, you know, let's go for it, you know. But anyway, yeah, that's the news of the World Junior Championships. So, on that note, I think this is a really good place to end today's episode, Chris. We've managed to go through all the different leagues and have a bit of a chat about them. We've managed to talk about some minor pieces of news, you know, which are important nonetheless, and kind of have a bit of a chat about the World Junior Championships. I think the World Junior Championships is something we should keep an eye on as we go about, and we can kind of update everybody with how it went when we kind of come back. So, for context, just to let you guys know, Chris reminded me of this actually. There's going to be an episode next week, obviously, because, you know, we're not at the Christmas holidays yet. Then the following 2 Fridays, there's going to be no episodes of the Europuck podcast. We'll remind you about this next week as well, but just to give you a heads up, because Christmas and New Year both fall on the Friday, which is when we usually upload our episodes. So you're getting at least a 2-week hiatus, and then within the New Year, Chris and I'll go for it.
So we might do some like kind of short 5-10 minute thing just to give you a little bit of something, but it won't be an hour and a bit episode because we've got families to see.
Exactly, yeah. So so there might be something here or there, or you might see us go silent in terms of episodes for the next 2 weeks. That doesn't mean we won't be active on social media or anything like that. It just means that, you know, it's Christmas. I think people will appreciate being with their family now more than ever this year, if they can see their families because of, you know, regulations and everything. But yeah, so you've got this episode, next week's episode, then you've got a couple of weeks off, then Chris and I will be back for the new year. So on that note, I think this is a really good place to end today's episode. Thank you everyone so much for joining us for this week's episode of the Europuck podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it, whether you've been watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple, or wherever else you get your podcasts. So if you want to keep updated on all things Europuck or send us your thoughts, opinions or questions, either from today's show or for our next show, then you can follow us on Twitter at Europuck Podcast. It's literally right down there, folks. Or you can follow us on Instagram at Europuck Podcast. It's also right there on the screen. And if you enjoyed listening to either or both of your hosts today, which we're now in the right order this time, so that's good, then you can follow myself on Twitter at OddmanRushYT or Chris at Chris_Gadsby, because I'm now Oddman Rush again, and Chris is now Chris again, which is good. That's always very helpful. But yeah, thanks again for listening, guys, and we'll see you again next time. Have a good one, folks.